Echoes from the Barrel, Daniel Geremus. Dedicated to my sons, David and Daniel, in case I never get to tell them my story in person. Forward, I have wanted to write a book for a long time. But where to begin? With the title, of course. Here are a few alternatives I considered. My Happy Life with a Sad Face. Too long. The Brooms Will Hang sounds threatening and untrue. 050. It's my age, but it sounds like a secret code. My Life in a Denim Jacket. I haven't spent my entire life in denim after all. Free sperm sounds like a very dubious offer. Birds sing even on Sundays, almost a winner. Daddy, don't fuff! Something my son used to say when he was little. I devour my dreams, a small play on words, as if my dreams were the very food that keeps me alive. Winter in a sack, cute, but nonsense. Scraps from the Trap, a bit raw, perhaps even vulgar. Echoes from the Barrel, that's the winner. It came from a simple mishearing, but I love it the most. It's my unplanned child. So I have a title. Now, who is this for? Not just for my sons, but for everyone who cares about my work and my life. Beginnings. Since time immemorial, humans have been fascinated by stories, whether true, embellished, or entirely fictional. This is my life story. I am writing it exactly as I remember it, exactly as I felt it. I won't name everyone, not out of cowardice, but because I'm not here to settle old scores. I believe 1969 was the most comfortable year of my life. The first 9 months in my mother's womb passed like a dream, and then came the dynamic 12th month, December, my birthday. Except for that minor incident where I spontaneously and with tears of joy peed on the nurse, the medical staff, and my mother handled it well. For a long time, I mistakenly believed the world only began when I was born, perhaps because it was shortly after the Warsaw Pact invasion. That was likely my first attempt at surrealism. I've always been fascinated by the perception of the unreal world. Before I started my own work, I was enchanted by Salvador Dali. My very first works were signed Dodgy, an abbreviation of Daniel Gizichka. Later, I chose Geremus as my pseudonym, my mother's maiden name. It sounded more worldly, more mysterious than my bird-like surname. Only years later did I discover how many great artists chose their names after their mothers. Besides, my original surname would have been a tongue twister abroad, as I later found out at my exhibition in Austria. It was a time of handing in party cards, of breaking characters and humiliating confessions. That frenzy was beyond me. For some reason, I thought I was a special boy. I secretly told my father this when I was about 5. He replied with a terrifying laugh, "Then you'll probably end up in a special school." I didn't get it then, but I realized I'd better keep my specialness to myself. For a long time, I never understood the phrase "two for behavior." Where was the two hiding? My teachers later taught me it wasn't a game. And I kept wondering why people said Naskle Danu instead of Nashla Danu. It made no sense, but school was coming, and I was excited. That excitement died in September. A teacher from the neighboring class burst into our room, marched me onto a platform, and falsely accused me of stealing a pocket knife. Even then, I loved to paint people, nature, and food. The subjects haven't changed, only the style. Back then, no one could teach me how to stretch a canvas. The internet was in its infancy, and the library was useless. Everything I know came from the slow, painful system of trial and error. I never read manuals. I build everything intuitively. Arrogance? Maybe. But I enjoy the struggle. I don't regret the time spent learning the basics. It stings when people say I have free talent while they have to work. I gave every second of my free time to painting. It was expensive. My first attempts were poor, but I had to persevere. Talent is only a prerequisite, not a guarantee. The slap. Every time I told that teacher I didn't have her knife, she slapped me. Hard. I decided not to cry, but a few tears escaped anyway. As a souvenir, she wrote a full-page note in my notebook. In red, of course. Welcome to reality. It caused such a stir that my dad went to school with me the next morning. He kept asking if I really hadn't stolen it. I didn't even know what steal meant yet. I remember him grabbing the huge school door handle, and I asked, "Dad, do they lie in that Russian newspaper, Pravda, too?" The note was crossed out. But since that slap, I've hated teachers. My own teacher didn't stand up for me. Instead, she spent the first grade telling us that men were useless drones and only mothers mattered. She was clearly projecting her own trauma. It made me insecure despite my bravery. Despite. What could have led me to such a dramatic interpretation of my work? It's hard to say. It has always been easier for me to express myself through painting than through spoken words. Most of the time, words simply wouldn't be enough. Words are heard, but rarely truly perceived. People often ask me what a particular painting means, which makes me feel uncomfortable. It's like telling a joke and having someone stare back blankly asking, "Is that it?" An awkward situation. I then wonder whose fault it was, a bad delivery, or just a weak, inappropriate joke. I sometimes try to put a bit of humor into my paintings, but I know that everyone has different tastes. That's why I only follow my instincts. Those around me either accept it or they don't. It would be naive to try and please everyone, and that's not my intention anyway. Before I even started school, and long before I knew how to swim, I jumped into the deep end of the pool, and before I could even read, I was reading fairy tales to the older kids in the hospital, using picture books with almost no text. I didn't enjoy school very much, but I was an expert at doodling in the margins of my notebooks or on my drinking cup. My teacher never fully appreciated the occasional portraits I sketched of her on the back pages. I didn't exactly excel in art class either. Often what I drew on my paper was miles away from what the teacher had sketched on the blackboard. The school's rigid approach acted more as a deterrent than an inspiration. You probably know what I mean. Even something you truly love can take on a bitter aftertaste when presented by the wrong teachers. Plus, as an unwanted bonus, there was the omnipresent socialism. Every moment was some kind of anniversary, celebrated with waving flags. I hated those red flags with a passion. Portraits of Lenin hung on almost every corner, looking not unlike the horned one himself. Under pressure, or perhaps in the hope of better grades, my classmates joined the pioneer organization. Little communists, a complete Husatjugend. The only ones in the whole class who didn't join were me and my eternal companion, Jara Blaha. In 2001, two of my paintings traveled by ship to Australia for a joint international exhibition, specifically to the Orange Regional Gallery in Melbourne. Given that the paintings were quite large and painted on hardboard, it was a bit of a challenge to get the Czech post to ship them. Fortunately, it worked out, and the paintings arrived on time and undamaged. It's an indescribable feeling when your works are hanging somewhere overseas while you're still hanging around in Lomnus. Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit, but in my version, the Creator will not punish them. I once tried to read the Bible, but I admit I didn't understand it very well. Biblical stories on television are a bit easier to grasp. The second painting from that exhibition, entitled Vessels, is not included in this book. I hope I'm not doing anyone an injustice, but when a 9 or 10-year-old child puts on a uniform and has a blood-red scarf ceremoniously tied around his neck, everyone tells him he is suddenly something more. Such a little brat in a scarf is supposed to be truthful, a straight A student, and always obedient to his adult comrades. Fortunately, my parents never forced me into it. But because I refused to join their ranks and socialize in an organized way, I somehow became a second-rate student. Jara and I didn't mind, though. We always had to walk at the very back during the May Day parades, so we wouldn't spoil the view for them. Even at the summer pioneer camps, they would shove us aside during formal ceremonies. They were probably ashamed of us. At a certain point, you simply become an outcast, and your grades or behavior no longer seem to matter. But the biggest upheaval of my life was yet to come. On June 21st, 1981. My parents hadn't been at ease for some time. One Saturday, my mother and I went to nearby Valdez to pick strawberries for a friend of hers. My brother was staying with my grandmother in Lomnus. On Sunday, a member of the state police showed up, looking very serious. The U.S. dollar, a symbol of money and power. At the time I painted this, I was working as a warehouse clerk at Technolan. From time to time, a customer would slip me a small tip, a bottle of wine, a pack of cigarettes, or a few coins for a beer. I never quite understood why they did it. Perhaps to ensure I did my job well, or maybe to go above and beyond the call of duty. It was interesting to find that the poorer the customer and the smaller the order, the bigger the tip. At first, I was a little offended by these gestures. Eventually, I got used to it, though I never asked for them. After one particularly large delivery, my colleague and I took a break. As I drifted into a light drowsiness, this image flashed into my mind. I still thank my former employer for that inspiration. We were driving home in a company car. I had a sickening feeling that something terrible had happened, but I didn't know what yet. When we got home, I was sent to my room. From there, I could only hear the muffled voices of my mother and the policeman. Before the cop left, he peeked into my room and said, in a tone as casual as if he were just relieving himself, "Oh, I almost forgot. You don't have a dad anymore. So, tough luck." He added that, presumably for us, the new widow and the half-orphan. I didn't even cry at that moment. I couldn't even comprehend what had happened. My dad had turned on the gas. My brother was the one who found him. It completely changed our lives. A few days later, I was home alone in the evening. As I lay in bed drifting off, I felt certain someone was standing over me. I heard slow, heavy breathing. I held my breath to make sure it wasn't my own. No, the breathing continued. I was too terrified to move, my eyes clamped shut. Suddenly, I could smell my dad. It was his scent. Perhaps he had come to say goodbye. I never told anyone about that night. I was afraid they would send me for some kind of psychiatric examination. Balance. The balance between art and money. When I paint for myself, the rule is simple. I have to like it. When I paint on commission, I consider the buyer's taste. I've always loved to draw and doodle. Even as a child, I sensed it would be beautiful to make a living as a painter. But poor grades in elementary school led me to 3 years at an agricultural vocational school. Then came 2 years of military service, followed by 3 years of mandatory work at the STS in Lomness to pay off my apprenticeship. It was clear that for a long time I could only paint after work. That meant coming home from a shift, working on the house, and then painting for a while instead of watching TV. You can do that when you're young, but over time, the routine becomes exhausting. I realized that painting requires your whole being. I didn't want a job as a nagging wife and painting as an occasional mistress. No more procrastinating. My decision was made. Or straight to the orphanage. After a while, my mother brought home a new boyfriend. As is often the case, some of the other children would occasionally make harsh comments about my father. I got into fights quite often because of it. But then again, I fought for other reasons too. My grades in the following years went downhill, and I started getting bad marks for behavior. It wasn't anything major. Jara and I just did the usual boyish things, but it was enough for the teacher to lower my grades. In 2012, during my exhibition at the Lomness Castle, that same former teacher came to me and apologized. She said she had given me and Jara those bad marks unnecessarily. I told her it didn't matter anymore. Truth be told, it didn't even matter to me back then. But I will never forget those beatings at home. The fact that the corporal punishment was repeated so often meant that eventually it didn't even hurt that much anymore. I stopped crying. It upset my mother so much that she was usually the one who cried instead. Every time it happened, I swore to myself I would still do exactly what I wanted, and I would never, ever hit my own children. I kept that promise. Sometime in the summer of 1998, I decided to visit the painter Joseph Gira in Malascala. I took time off work and loaded 3 of my paintings into our old Trabant. It took me a while to find his cottage. A German shepherd was lying on the threshold, staring me down. I didn't dare get closer. After a while, the dog understood and went to wake his master. Mr. Gira came out, looking exhausted. After I explained that I just wanted him to look at my work, he spoke briefly and sent me to see Vladimir Komarek. So I visited Komarek that same day. He looked at my painting titled Body for what seemed like an eternity. Then he said, "Well, look, young man, you're out of luck." My heart sank. Then he continued, "You actually know how to paint, and that's not very popular these days. But if you persevere and don't succumb to some passing fashion trend, your time will come." Of course, that made me incredibly happy. It was fascinating that 2 legendary painters told me the exact same thing that day. Persevere and be yourself. They caught me sometimes, usually by the impractical handle of my school bag. An angry adult would bark, "What's your name, you rascal?" And I would whine with the most innocent face I could muster. I forgot, please." It was such blatant nonsense. Yet it usually worked so well that the grip on my bag loosened and the bird flew away. If that failed, a completely random name would do the trick. Dvořák, Čapek, or maybe Fuchik, whoever we were currently discussing in class. Foreign names would have been too suspicious, so Lenin never quite made the cut. After a while, even that stopped working because everyone in town knew who we were. Later, our classmate Zdenda joined us. Now there were 3 of us up to mischief, so there was never a shortage of ideas. Once, for reasons I can't recall, the teacher left us after school without supervision. That was a massive mistake. On our way to the lockers room, we accidentally found some crayons. We scribbled all sorts of nonsense on the walls. I admit, I mainly drew diamonds and swastikas. I correctly assumed that those symbols would piss off the teaching staff the most. Every child eventually realizes that beneath the masks of St. Nicholas and the devil are just ordinary men. A revealed angel, however, is a different story. Every painting should have its own mystery, its own magic, and its own soul. I love the feeling when someone asks me at an exhibition opening what a painting means. I only ever drop hints. If a group of people starts discussing it, a fascinating debate can develop, with everyone imagining something different. That's good. We all perceive things differently, and a painting is not a traffic sign. Questions like, "Did you really paint all of these yourself?" make me a little nervous. When I say yes, some people still look skeptical and stubbornly point to another one. "And did you draw this one too?" Other favorites include, "Where do you get your ideas? Do you paint while you're drunk? Or are you on something? Because if you are, I want some too." As I said, it's fine that we're all a little different. My guess was spot on. The teacher quickly figured out who the last ones to leave the classroom were. The trail of drawings led straight from our desks to the locker room like a map. I hadn't counted on the detective skills or the sheer stubbornness of our homeroom teacher. It nearly resulted in a C in conduct. School slippers were for cowards. I always wore white sneakers, the so-called Chinese shoes. They were the perfect canvas for writing inscriptions on. The most provocative was the innocent-looking English word kiss, named after the now legendary American band. I wrote it with those 2 jagged letters at the end, exactly like the original logo, something my teacher flatly refused to accept. The sneakers were supposed to stay in the locker room, but that rule only lasted until the 2nd period. During breaks, we had too much fun racing through the hallways in them. Plus, you didn't have to waste time with the awkward changing of shoes. Overall, the school was simply unwilling to respect my temperament. The teachers clearly favored the model students, the ones with exemplary notebooks and perfect homework who sat motionless at their desks, occasionally raising a hand to win. The egg. Nights are varied, of different lengths, yet there's a folk saying they are like 2 peas in a pod. For me, the egg is a symbol of the seed of life, a mystery wrapped in a perfect shape. In this painting, the shell is in the hand, while the yolk takes the form of the moon in the sky. Eggs appear often in my work, whether whole or broken. They always hold a secret. It is remarkable how an egg transforms into a bird. A swallow lays eggs. The young grow up and lay more eggs, a cycle since time immemorial that never ceases to fascinate me. How do eggs and dreams rhyme? Sometimes a dream becomes the blueprint for a painting. There are many theories about the nature of dreams, but for me, a dream is like an egg from which a painting hatches. Once it's born, it lives its own life. In time, it leaves its native nest and flies off into the world. Above all, students, don't ask questions and don't argue, just repeat. Only a certain type of student was allowed to succeed anyway. Through my own lack of effort, I ended up with a shovel in my hand. Once you're placed in the box labeled vocational school, there's no escape. I didn't worry about it then. They wouldn't have let me into art school anyway. And at 13, it's too early to think seriously about your path in life. All that was left was to suffer through the rest of elementary school. The 8th grade felt a lifetime away. On the bright side, Jara lived just a few meters from us, so we often visited each other before school, sometimes at his place, but more often at ours. We would blast records, especially my older brothers, because we couldn't do that when he was home. Cigarettes would mysteriously vanish from my mother's Clie pack. Sometimes our morning chess games would drag on, and we wouldn't show up to school until the 2nd or 3rd period. Of course, the teacher always found out. When we finally made our gracious entrance, reeking of cigarette smoke, she rewarded us with notes in our report cards. School meant nothing to us. We found the whole thing laughable. The thumbprint, an old black and white photograph of the former Lomnus Club, Chumachi, inspired this painting. The large thumbprint represents the touch of death of the coming World War, something the club members in the photo could never have imagined at the time. One by one, countries were dragged into the global slaughter. After the war, many of the defendants laconically stated they were just following orders. In my own life, I've heard the mantra, "I was told to," or "I only did what I was ordered to do," far too many times. People love to hide their own responsibility behind someone or something else. But I believe that in the end, each of us will stand face to face with the Creator at the moment of death. And in that moment, there will be no excuses. Yet somewhere deep inside me, there was still a feeling that I wanted to achieve something in life. I just wasn't quite sure what. In 5th grade, we visited the Lomnus Museum to see an exhibition by the painter Joseph Cobert. I was blown away by it. I felt that this was it. But with my grades and behavior, it was unrealistic. Logically, I concluded that I wasn't going to change because of stupid grades. I can paint after work, and at least no teacher will interfere. Maybe it was a bad decision, maybe not. Many people graduate from the Academy of Fine Arts and then do something else. Or they don't even accept the applicant, and he makes a name for himself anyway. As boys, we often like to fight with someone. We signed up for judo. Because we enjoyed it, we had great results. After about a year, they sent us to the district in Jichin. To the uninitiated, judo may seem like mindless wrestling. It's about self-defense, technique, agility, reading your opponent, and the feeling of victory. What I liked most about it was that unlike team sports, everyone is on their own. No excuses about teammates. I always placed 1st to 3rd in competitions. A beautifully designed 2,000 koruna note. Emma Destinova, a famous opera singer, is featured on this banknote. It's a shame I have so few opportunities to use it. Art and money in one. In my interpretation, I painted spoons on her eyes. For me, a spoon is one of the symbols of home. After a while, I brought a spoon from home with me to the army. It's a tiny thing, but it brought me a little closer to the long-awaited civilian life. Sometimes someone gets the idea to give my painting as a gift to newlyweds. I praise this and always explain how it's a good idea. A mixer, toaster, or vacuum cleaner is certainly fine for a start. After about 2 or 3 years, the appliance will break down, and that's the end of it. Whereas a painting hangs on the wall, doesn't eat bread, and if the marriage lasts, their children's children will look at it too. Once I came home from a tournament where I won first place. I didn't get a medal or a diploma. I wasn't as upset about that as I was that my mom didn't believe me. I had nothing to show for it. To be honest, I didn't really enjoy judo training. After the warm-up and theory, we practiced moves and then came my favorite part, randori. It was basically choosing an opponent and fighting on the tatami, within the rules, of course. More and more often, a girl about a year or two older than me would pick me. At first, I didn't like fighting a girl, but soon the two of us would end up rolling around on the mat, more or less just going through the motions. We rolled our young, agile bodies around, first her on top, then me on top of her. It wasn't about judo anymore. I sensed there were other, far more interesting contact sports in the world. It was also the beginning of the era of long hair. Teachers would sarcastically lecture me. Long hair, short mind. In my prepubescent insolence, I always thought, short hair, no mind. To this day, I still don't get along with barbers. The old green note, the old 100-crown note. It accompanied me from childhood all the way to adulthood. In this painting, the front and back merge, and a 100-crown Skoda car in that iconic green shade was added. I love looking at banknotes for their aesthetic beauty. I've spent a long time studying them, noticing every tiny detail. I think about them more philosophically than economically. Old currency has an exciting patina. I think about how many hands it has passed through and what it once could buy. How many stories and desires are hidden behind each one? There is also an insistent feeling of vanity, of transience. Old banknotes remind me of butterfly wings. This painting was originally intended as a wedding gift, but before the wedding took place, the giver decided to keep it and gave the newlyweds something else instead. It was nice that at that time, the air in Lomnica was quite polluted from the local factories, so we used to go to the mining town of Wałbrzych in socialist Poland. We breathed deeply the completely different polluted air. It was nice there. The adults mostly drank vodka, since they hadn't seen each other all year and wouldn't see each other again for another year. So my brother and I had more freedom. If you want to learn more about the games, you can watch the animated series, Come On, Sir, Let's Play. It has everything. My grandmother in Poland also persuaded me every vacation to finally get a haircut. Once, my grandmother Zofia and I went to PDT, which is a local department store, and we met her friend. And then it happened. Zofia, you never told me you had such a beautiful granddaughter. I didn't find it flattering at all. It also happened that a Polish great uncle of mine who had served in France during the war kissed my hand, thinking that I was a young lady. My mother didn't manage to stop him in time. After she explained that I was just a boy with longer hair, my uncle said, "Better to be mistaken than rude." A white door like a tombstone. The entrance to a grave. The cross is also there. It wasn't my idea or a revelation in a dream. In short, once, during the renovation of our house by the swimming pool, there was an old white door lying in the grass that I had put there, which had gradually become overgrown with grass. That door no longer exists, except in this painting. The painting also changed owners. The house I laboriously rebuilt is still standing, but I don't live there. You've probably also had the experience of talking to someone, seeing them often or only rarely. Sometime after your last meeting, you learn that the person has died, quite without warning, without you having the opportunity to tell them anything important. Only memories remain, which gradually fade and fade away over time, or merge into one indistinct memory. I always make it easier for myself by talking to the deceased in my mind and finishing the unspoken words somewhere else. As a boy, I collected plastic World War II soldiers. For some reason, they were impossible to find in our country, but they were everywhere in Poland. I had to beg my parents for money, and sometimes my mom would send me to my grandfather. He always wanted to see what I bought, but I never showed him the German soldiers out of a strange kind of sensitivity. During the war, he and my grandmother had been totally committed to the Reich, and as a result, Grandpa Geremus hated anything German with a burning passion. His blood would boil just at the sound of the language. In elementary school, I wanted to take German as an elective, but my teacher wouldn't hear of it, insisting I attend manual workshops instead. She may have meant well, but it hurt my feelings deeply. Out of a mix of spite and laziness, I never caught up with the language later. I know teaching is a demanding profession. Over the years, every teacher develops some kind of tic or a favorite phrase that unintentionally amuses the whole class. That's the better case. The worst case is a certain disdain and insensitivity toward the students. Maturity and decay. The symbolism in this painting is obvious, from immaturity to maturity, and finally to decay. Perhaps it is about food, or perhaps it is about life itself. The ubiquitous phallic shapes of nature are present here too. It is remarkable how many fruits, berries, and plants can be compared to parts of the human body. I wonder what the Creator was trying to tell us. Perhaps he wanted to show us our own beauty in youth, our freshness and purity. But we cannot stop time. We ripen and ripen until, eventually, eternity reaps us. I prefer to paint fruit or vegetables that have been touched by life. They don't seem as artificial or perfectly arranged as they do in a store. People often ask why I paint fruit this way. A slightly bruised or rotten apple is no longer appealing to eat, but hasn't it lived a small life story of its own? It bears witness to the transience of its physical form. People don't like to talk about their finitude in this world, and yet it is fundamental. It is inevitable. It is our only certainty. Sometimes, a curious teacher would make a student stand up at their desk during class and ask point blank, "And why are your parents getting divorced?" Or, "What did your grandmother die of?" It was amazingly pleasant. Whenever a teacher had to step out, she'd demand total silence and always put a girl in charge. The moment that girl got a taste of power, she turned into a little beast. Even if she didn't write us up on the board, the teacher would still snatch mine and Jara's student books, claiming we could be heard all the way down the hall. Another reprimand was born. Who else would have been the troublemakers? The potato brigades were better. Not that I enjoyed the work, but we were in the fresh air and had plenty of opportunities for mischief. Not far from us, Soviet soldiers were also picking potatoes. Their commander stood within firing range, and we discreetly tried to knock his massive cap off his head with potatoes. The drivers would give us a few crowns for our work, probably for cigarettes, plus 2 rolls, a slice of Gotha salami, and some lemonade. To this day, when I buy those things, I wonder just how much of our native soil I actually ate back then. The fallen, proud tree trunks that just a moment ago were reaching for the sky. I felt an obligation to capture them on canvas before they were cleared away. I love to capture transience and the temporary nature of things in my paintings, recycling without the fun. Trees will never truly disappear from this world. They will only change their form. No one knows for sure what happens to a person after death, but the idea that there is nothing afterwards terrifies me. It makes no sense at all. All the suffering, joy, love, work, and faith cannot simply evaporate. I don't begrudge materialists their opinions. After all, that too is a form of belief. I've never been attracted to organized religions, sects, or theological groups. For me, faith is far more important than religion. I never ask God for anything. I think it would offend him. I already have everything I need to live. Sometimes I simply thank him for a new day in this world, for the successes, but also for the lessons learned through failure. Going to the cinema was always an adventure. Most of the time, they fed us Russian crap, but I was deeply impressed by the film Krakonosh and the skiers. The director, Vera Shimkova-Plivova, was born right here in our town of Lomnitz, which gave me a rare sense of pride and worldliness. Around that same time, our whole class started going for medical checkups. My teeth were fine, but my eyesight was beginning to fail. Back then, few kids wore glasses, and I desperately wanted to avoid them. I thought there was nothing stupider than standing in front of that eye chart with letters shrinking from top to bottom. So, in the few minutes it took the doctor to examine my classmates, I memorized the whole thing. It worked for a few years, even though I could barely see the chart at all. By 8th grade, however, the game was up. I've been wearing glasses ever since. It ruined my image as the class rebel a bit. After all, only nerds wore glasses back then. The time was approaching to choose a vocational school. Honestly, I didn't care. With my poor grades and reputation, my only options were becoming a bricklayer or a mechanic for agricultural machinery. Mona Lisa, often imitated, often parodied. Even I couldn't resist. It's not a mockery of the old master, but rather a tribute to his genius. If it weren't for the old masters and the history of painting, I probably wouldn't be doing this at all. Since the days of cave paintings, humans have felt the urge to create. I can still imagine the vibration and excitement those early artists felt. They say prostitution is the oldest profession, and that may be true. But to exaggerate only slightly, painting is the second oldest. How often do I feel like a prostitute when I offer my work for sale? Sometimes a stranger asks me what I do for a living. When I answer truthfully that I paint pictures, a flash of contempt often appears in their eyes. In that moment, even a prostitute seems to have more social prestige to them than an artist. I don't blame them. I can see immediately where their inclinations lie. Because my mother's boyfriend worked at the STS in Lomnitz, they pushed me toward a vocational school in Vysoké nad Jizerou. During the summer holidays after elementary school, my mom, Hansa, and I went to Bulgaria to the seaside. The sunny beach was nice, I suppose, but pretty boring. I met a girl there, Jitka, and we became very close. But the romance ended, at least for me, the moment the trip was over. Many people say they'd love to return to their childhood. Not me. I'm much better off now. I don't have to answer to anyone. I do what I want, when I want. In 8th grade, they issued us ID cards, even though we weren't 15 yet. It was an intoxicating feeling of adulthood. I already knew how to smoke, so it was time for alcohol. My older friends and I headed to the nearby Genoese ponds. Back then, it was beautiful there. Better than Bulgaria. We weren't interested in swimming, though. The main thing was to sit with a beer in a plastic cup and act like jerks. The local pub owner knew instantly I was nowhere near 18. My friends who were of age bought the beer, and he just warned me. If the cops show up, you'd better hide in the bathroom. Sure enough, that evening, the comrades in uniform appeared. The music of painting. In a moment, the music will start. It's fascinating how music affects us. Through our hearing, it pumps emotions and moods into us, inadvertently triggering all sorts of memories. Paintings are supposed to have the same effect, just through different means. My paintings vary greatly in style and size. At exhibitions, this often creates an impression of fragmentation and a lack of cohesion. It confuses some visitors. They sometimes ask if I am the only artist exhibiting or if there are several of us. After a quarter century of creating art, I think it's good to experiment with new techniques and ways of expressing myself. It isn't my goal to invent a new style. When asked exactly what style I paint in, I can't give a precise answer. Perhaps that's a good thing. I respond vaguely, saying I paint landscapes, still lifes, portraits, and my own imagination. After all, I can't exactly say with total arrogance, that is the Geremus style. Following the expert instructions, I hid in the men's room. It was a long, tense wait, so after a while, I decided to slip out through the window. But a member of the state police was already standing there. With the grin of a successful hunter, he barked, "Hey, young man, your ID card?" "I don't have one," I replied. "So you forgot it at home, huh? Where are you from?" I put on my most innocent face and said, "Lomnus, but I'm only 14. The policeman, apparently from Jichin, just grabbed his cap in frustration. "Get out of here! Right now!" he snapped, letting me go like a fisherman releasing an undersized fish. After the holidays, my mother and I set off for the vocational school in Visoke Najizero. The start of my apprenticeship was awkward. There were 41 of us in the class. Someone was clearly extra. They realized that although they had accepted everyone, one student had to go. They decided to transfer whoever had submitted their application last. My premonition came true. My application had the latest date. So on Wednesday, we headed to Laznia Belohrad instead. The principal welcomed us and immediately took my mother into the staff room. I stood in the hallway feeling that I might not even get into this stupid school after all. The Water Cellar. The original is by the Spanish master, Diego Velázquez. It's called The Water Cellar of Seville, painted around 1619. I took the liberty of modifying it slightly, not improving it, just changing it. I hope the master forgives me. Often, just for my own amusement, when I see someone passing by, I imagine them in period clothing or professional attire. They say, clothes make the man. Of course, watching the news, I can't help but notice that the biggest scams and crimes are committed by those who are perfectly dressed. It makes sense, but it's funny when people look down on me because I'm not dressed properly enough. Then you hear about a quiet boy from the neighborhood who commits a heinous crime, and the neighbors all say, "We never would have thought him capable of such a thing. He was such a quiet boy. He always said hello." Within 10 minutes, my mother came out, and I was summoned for a bizarre interview. The director looked furious and utterly unapproachable. He glared at my elementary school report card and muttered, "I don't know. I don't know if we should even take you. Bad grades, a 2 in conduct. We deal with people like you in no time. Tell me, do you know when Comrade Vissarionovich Stalin died?" That was a direct hit. I loved history, and that date is easy to remember. I replied with total confidence, March 5th, 1953. He blurted out in surprise, "Fine, I'll accept you. I'll teach you history myself." From that moment on, my history grades were straight A's. Even in Czech and my hated Russian classes, the D's turned into A's and B's. Most of it was just a repeat of what I already knew, but I certainly hadn't studied during the holidays. Never. My math remained just satisfactory, though. I was good at PE, but I didn't get along with the teacher. I unwisely ran the 50-meter dash so fast in my very first class that it became a school record. Not me, Jan. How many people have the courage to lay down their lives for their beliefs, like Master Jan Hus or Jan Palach? Not me, Jan is the title of this painting and also my personal answer to that question. To back down, to deny oneself, and then, once the enemy's spit has dried on your face, to claim that things are different again. It is difficult to judge the value of a life lived like that. Fortunately, I don't live in such extreme times and haven't had to face such a test to my core. Nevertheless, every day is a test. Looking back, I often didn't even realize at the moment that my character was being weighed. Life is not a routine. Every day has meaning. I don't want to fall into a stereotype when painting. Sure, some technical procedures I do mechanically, but the possibilities are endless. For example, when painting Lamnis. The only true limitation is within myself. I'm just trying to see how far I can go. The gym teacher was thrilled and immediately started planning training sessions and competitions. So naturally, I deliberately started running much slower. The erratic little man couldn't stand it. He pulled me aside several times and yelled, "Where are you from, you little brat?" Lamnis. That's where they have those anti-state faces like yours. No one ever gets a C in gym class, but you. You're going to get one. I was actually taller than him, and I enjoyed it all the more when he turned red over a grade on a report card. For the first time in my life, I was probably the top student in my class. Occasionally, the principal would tease me about being the only one who hadn't joined the Socialist Youth Union, SSM. I just calmly explained that membership was supposed to be completely voluntary. Once again, I was spoiling the comrades' perfect record. My long hair also made me stand out. I always had a few flimsy excuses ready. No one at the dorm minds, not at work, not even the other teachers, only you besides. My mom wants it this way. She forbade me from cutting it. As a precaution, the front desk right under the teacher's nose was reserved for me throughout my entire apprenticeship. They usually tested me right there at my desk, not even bothering to pull me up to the podium. The tapeworm. This is one of those paintings that can be hung upside down. In fact, it's always both upside down and right side up. It's also particularly suitable for people with allergies. Sometimes I ask my girlfriend if we should get a small, low-maintenance pet. She always shuts me down, saying that I sometimes disappear to a bar for a week and she has no intention of cleaning up after it. One night, while sitting at the bar, I had a brilliant idea. I'll get a tapeworm. It takes care of itself, and we can go to the bar together without any problems at all. I used to keep rabbits and goats. Rabbits aren't as demanding or picky as goats. Once, one of my goats died, and I buried it behind the house. Years later, I accidentally dug it up. I ended up using its skull several times as a model for my paintings, so, in a way, it remained useful even after death. My physics teacher was quite cross-eyed and could never remember our names. It caused a lot of confusion when he'd stare into the distance and bark, "Come to the blackboard!" He'd get furious when the wrong student stood up, someone sitting 2 desks away from where he thought he was looking. One day he spotted the silver $50 hanging around my neck. He practically lunged out of his chair to snatch it. I defended myself fiercely, and we ended up in a bizarre sort of dance in front of the whole class. When he realized he couldn't overpower a 14-year-old boy, he angrily ordered me to the barber. When I pointed out I had no money, he pulled out a 5 Karuna coin and told me to get a haircut. and be back in time for his next class. Instead, I went into town, bought 2 beers, and drank them. When I returned, still shaggy, I assured him the barber was closed. He nearly made me swear that his 5 crowns had been lost in some unfortunate accident. But he really lost his footing when he triumphantly sniffed the air and shouted, "And how is it that I can smell beer on you?" The spoons. 2 ways to hold a spoon. 2 ways to hold on to life. As children, we enjoy life as a matter of course. Adults, with all their good intentions, gradually try to take that away from us. In adulthood, simply enjoying life can become hard work. I try not to let myself be bothered by trivial, everyday worries. In the evening before falling asleep, I think about what I will paint tomorrow. I let my thoughts flow freely in a state of relaxation, perhaps meditation, and the images come to me on their own. Working while lying down with my eyes closed is easily the most pleasant way to create. The only problem is remembering it all in the morning. Only rarely am I motivated enough to get up and write the idea down. I console myself with the thought that if an image doesn't last until morning, it probably wasn't worth much anyway. But when I do wake up with an idea, I feel like a schoolboy, not one facing annoying lessons, but one heading out on a school trip to some wonderful far-off place, far from the mundane and the boring. I can't wait to start painting again. I quickly answer the expected question. That's non-alcoholic beer, comrade. The teacher is still upset about the 5 crowns, so he tries to appeal to my emotions. All right, I'll write to your mother. Next Monday, you will bring me the 5 crowns. Here comes the highlight of our performance, where I put on my saddest expression and whisper with a certain sense of tragedy. I really don't know. We're finally saving up for linoleum, and my mother would surely cry if we didn't have enough money left for it. He stared at his desk for a long time and said nothing. He capitulated. It may seem like a mean lie to you. I was just following the example of most adults. They also took 5 crowns from us every now and then for a solidarity fund for the poor people in Vietnam. Where the money ended up, even Ho Chi Minh himself probably didn't know at the time. At the boarding school, it didn't start off too well either. No one was counting on me anymore, so I was left with a bed in a room occupied exclusively by dropouts. The bed also had no pillow, so for several nights, I used a black briefcase instead. Not many books and notebooks fit in it, but it was mainly about the impression. A composite of 2 paintings, The Bitter Potion by Adrian Brower and Young Girl Defending Herself Against Eros by William Adolph Bouguereau. Some paintings, when combined, take on new meaning, and surprisingly, it can work. It's not a bad idea to try to imitate the works of the old masters. According to one theory, a person becomes a master in their field if they have devoted 10,000 hours to it. I have achieved that. Every now and then someone addresses me as master, but I don't like it. Depending on the situation, I usually reply that there can only be one master. When asked who that is, I answer, Master Jan Hus. Apart from the fact that Hus and I were born in the same year, 69, we probably have nothing else in common, even though I spent most of my life on Hus Square. It's ingrained in my skin. Goose skin. Funeral processions used to pass by our house. Then you could hear live music from the pub across the street. Life and death at a glance, from joy to sorrow and back again. They were all dropouts, so I fit right in with their mischief. A young teacher about 25 would rush in every few minutes to hand out punishments, but she never punished me. My innocent, angelic eyes worked on her every single time. The other boys were almost resentful, but I always appeased them by sketching a quick cartoon nude on a scrap of paper, and all was well. Back then, getting hold of a dirty magazine was a real challenge. In the classroom, where we spent most of our time, I drew more or less pornographic cartoons to amuse my classmates, complete with spicy commentary. When the notebook was nearly full of these drawings, the teacher suddenly confiscated it. She showed the creations to the other teachers and the principal. The principal then invited the mother to come and see the work. In the end, nothing much came of it. It was viewed as a teenager drawing inappropriate pictures. Since the grades and behavior were otherwise good, no expulsion followed. At the boarding school, there was pressure to choose an extracurricular activity. To avoid other options, the claim was made that motocross was the only interest. The birch tree. Walks past this birch tree with the dog were frequent. Even a tree can have a personality. This one has an unmistakable scar on its bark. The tree stands just above the swimming pool at the crossroads leading to Koshov and the castle. Barcha, the dog, would wait there almost every time. If she got the impression the path led toward Koshov, she'd bolt in that direction first. Sometimes it was fun to let her believe she was on the right track, only to change direction toward the castle after a few steps. Barcha wouldn't notice until she was halfway up the hill. She'd come running back with a look of confusion, as if asking what happened. The dog simply got a bit more exercise. No major changes were expected that year, which made the surprise even bigger. Women may send out warning signals, but they do so on a frequency that men are simply unable to pick up.